Hello there and welcome. I'm Ole Brøgger, and if you're new here, I really hope I'll earn your subscription today. Bambu Lab was so kind to send me this A1 3D printer, and I'm very excited about it. They have not paid me to make this video, but they sent me this printer for free. And I'm going to make a project where I'm going to use some FDM printing, and you can see it's already down here. So we better get started. I've not owned a FDM printer for over 6 years now. And the last thing I have printed on a FDM printer was the brackets for these lights and sound dampening panels. And after that, I just went to print on resin printer because I wanted the details on miniatures and other stuff that a resin printer can do. But there's still a lot of things you can do on a FDM printer that I actually have missed. But I didn't feel the need to go and invest and buy one. And the evolution on 3D printers has evolved a lot over the last 6 years. I can tell you that my first 3D printer, I got it in 2011. And that was an open source kit. I don't even know what brand it was. And I never got it to work. In 2015, I got a DaVinci Mini. It actually worked pretty well, and that was the one I used for the last time on the project on these sound panels. And it's just insane how the 3D printers have evolved now and what you can do with them and the speed. This printer was so easy to assemble. It took me about half an hour to assemble this printer and set everything up, installing some filament and run my first test print. And of course, that was the Benchy. And I was very impressed because it was so fast. That specific model took me 12 minutes to print. On my old DaVinci Mini, that took an hour and 10 minutes. So that was a huge difference in speed, and the details were a lot better. And the second thing I printed on this printer was actually for the printer itself. I printed this little guard over here, and it is for this poop box. Every time you change the color or you just change the filament, starting up the printer, it will always make sure that there's filament in the nozzle. So it will make some of these small little wastes, and it is very nice to have a box to collect everything in instead of it's just running all over the table. And of course, I also had to try printing a vase. It is very beautiful here, and it's perfect. There was a tiny bit of a flaw down here, but otherwise, I just love this little model. I've also printed some more practical stuff. Right now, I need to clean up all the mess that's actually behind that camera. I will show you how the setup is right now and how messy it looks down there. But I bought some IKEA Alex furniture, and someone made a Gridfinity box grid for those drawers, and it's just perfect. I can store all my little nips and dips. Everything is organized, and I just love that Gridfinity. And talking about the camera over here, it takes up a lot of space behind the scenes, and I have very difficult to get to all my materials and getting through all that mess over there. So I want to have a rail up here in the ceiling, and I'm going to bring you along how I'm going to build that. So I can just drag and move the camera around as I see fit. And then we can go back to this nice bridge that I also printed, and we're going to build a river and some very flat terrain that I'm actually going to use in my next session. Let's start with the rail on the ceiling, and then I can go back and start building this bridge and river. This is a ceiling mount that I bought very cheap on Amazon. And then I have this flex arm that's going to be carrying the whole rig. I went into Tinkercad and designed this model here. I think it is printed very sturdy and it should hold all the equipment. There's a slot here for the ceiling mount and it should fit right in here. And then I can put in a couple of screws and I think this should stay put. Just need to tighten those a bit. This is pretty much it. It's just solid here. And then we need some wheels. I tried to print these in TPU and they're squishy. I won't attach any ball bearings or anything because I actually like that it is running tight on this rail I have built out of wood. So I'll just put in one of these, a washer and a nut. And I don't want them to be too tight because I want it to be able to spin, but it still has some wiggle room and the weight from all this will just keep it down and lock it in. Now these two are a bit longer and that's just because I didn't have 6 of these bolts. And it actually doesn't matter because then I have something to put the wires that are going to the camera and teleprompter. But let's go to the garage and make that rail. I found this board of wood. It is 2 meters long, it is 100 millimeters wide and 19 millimeters thick. This will be the bottom of the rail and then I cut out these pieces of wood to lower it from the ceiling. I also mounted some metal brackets and then I'm going to paint it with this ruins and cliffs. It was just the paint I have laying around and I have a lot of it. I mounted the rail in the ceiling and then it was time to test it out for the first time and see if everything fits. And it works, but I think when I put some weight on it, it may be a bit tight, but it's okay. Now I just need to put in the last few screws and tighten things up and mount the camera. All cables are installed and camera works. And look at this. This is just perfect. And the weight wasn't any problem. It just works perfectly. I really like this setup. I need some terrain with a river and a bridge. I could have built a bridge out of foam, but I think now that I got this awesome Bambu Lab A1, I want to print one. I wanted the bridge to be partially broken, and I went to MakerWorld and found the perfect model. And the Bambu Lab software is just so awesome. MakerWorld is just integrated right into it. You can just click download and open, and you got your model ready to print. It didn't quite have the right size, so I could just resize it to the shape that I needed, and I could just enter the numbers right in here. I wanted it to be 200 millimeters long, 75 millimeters wide, and 50 millimeters tall. And then it will fit perfectly in the height of my foam. Now I just need to press slice, and the software will automatically add support if it is needed. It will take a few seconds to slice the bridge. Then you can check if your print is okay with the supports. You can see how much filament the printer will use and how long it will take to print. Then you just press send and the printer will do the rest. For the riverbed, I will use this very cheap EPS foam. It was about $1 for a 120 by 60 centimeter piece. And then I also got some 50 millimeters that was about $3. So it is very cheap to work with EPS, but it is a pain with the texture. The 50 millimeter foam will only be used as races, and then I will use the 10 millimeter foam on top of those to build some flat terrain next to the river where I can just put some scatter terrain. I will build this terrain in 3 parts just to make it easier to store and transport. And these boards are, as I said before, 120 by 60. So I will cut them in 3 parts, so I will end up with 3 pieces that are 60 by 40. And the riverbanks, I will use XPS foam because it is a lot more sturdy and easier to work with, and it takes up texture a lot easier than the EPS foam. I'll just use my handheld hot wire cutter to cut out the texture of the river banks. And now we can see if the bridge fits, and it just fits almost perfectly. I need to raise it about 5 millimeters, so I didn't get the height totally right, but it's okay. I'll just use this 5 millimeter blue XPS foam for the river side and put it under the bridge so it will be flush with the road above. And I used this blue foam for the shoreline all along the river. All the foam has been cut out, so now I'll just use my hot glue gun to attach it to the EPS foam in the bottom. I think the bridge also needs a railing, and I want some tiles on the top, but it still has to look broken. So I will actually cut some individual tiles. These will be 3 millimeters thick, and for the railing I will make them 1 by 2 centimeters. And it actually starts to take shape right now. And so far I have spent 1.5 hours building all this. But to smooth everything out on the river shore, I will use this wall filler. It's almost like a plaster, but it has a longer working time. And I really need that because I hate working with plaster. I also hate this, but it is a bit better. We also need a road, and for this I have this thin sheet of cork. It is 1 millimeter thick, and it has this perfect texture for the road. It's easy to work with, and you don't even need a knife or a scissor, you can just rip it apart. I also need some wheel tracks, and I have this dentist tool. I just bought a very cheap set on Amazon. I can just rip it up and make it look like a wheel track. I will make 2 sideboards that will have the road continuing throughout them. And I will make sure it doesn't matter how I orient them, the road will just have to fit either way. I can use them individually and I can combine them with the river, and I think this will be a very useful terrain in the future and not only for one session. And now I'm gonna prime it. I'm using this Game Master Dungeon and Subterranean spray paint from the Army Painter. Unfortunately, you can't get this anymore, but I got a stock and I will just use it as long as I have it because it's a lot easier than using Mod Podge. It has almost the same effect. It's not as good as using Mod Podge, but I need to be done with this build in a hurry, so this is the easy way. And at normal room temperature, it dries in about half an hour. So now I'm going to put some different colors on it and give it some color. I'm using some very cheap craft paints and some airbrush paints. I'll use some inks in the airbrush, and then I think we have a very good painted result. The supports you have to break off and actually throw away or save or something is perfect to use as trees. This was the support on the bridge. I'm just using a brush on primer, and then I will use the dark wood speed paint to make them look like wood. This is Mod Podge, and this is just a leftover from this bottle. I have thinned it down with a lot of water just to get the rest out of the bottle. I'll mix it with some black and brown paint, and then I'll just spread it all over the surface where I'm going to put some flocking. I'm just going to use a mix of flocking. I have all sorts of stuff, and I really like to have some color variations of brown and green. I'm not going to use any kind of rocks or anything because I want the surface to be as flat as possible so I can put some scatter terrain on top of it. I thought it needed some more dry brushing, so I used a light gray on all the rocks and cliffs and gave it a very light dry brush. And finally, some tufts. I'm going to use a lot of colors of different kinds of tuft just to give it a lot of color variation. And when choosing the location of tufts, I try to put them places where players are not going to put their miniatures. And here we got the painted support materials, and I'll just use some white PVA glue to put them in and put a piece of reindeer moss on top, and now we got a tiny tree. Last thing I need to do is to secure the ends of the river because I'm going to make a resin pour, and I'll use some clear packaging tape and some hot glue to seal everything off. A resin mixing cup and some 2-component resin. I'll mix it up. I'll also add some color to the resin. and this is some resin toner. I'll use some green and blue just to give it a tiny tint of color. And then we're ready to pour it. I will just make a very slow pouring and let the resin find its way to the corners by itself. It's finally done, and this is one of the fastest builds I've ever done in this size. Everything took about 5 hours just to build this, and I've deducted the print time of the bridge and the curing time. It took for 24 hours to cure this resin. It was a sloppy paint job and the flocking isn't maybe as good, but 5 hours and you get this, I think that is pretty okay. And this printer is just amazing. It's so easy to use, and the possibilities of what I can do with terrain builds in the future, they are just endless. So thank you Bambu Lab for sending me this printer. And if you are interested in getting a printer like this, I have an affiliate link down in the description, and you can get a printer like this at a very affordable price. I also printed a couple of more things, like this little campfire that fits right here on an electronic candlelight. I also printed this, and this is a magic wall that I'm going to use in one of my upcoming sessions. I found it on Mega World and I modified it a bit so it had a holder. I split it up in 3 parts so I could install some fairy lights, and I think the effect is pretty cool. Very easy to make, and it didn't take long. This is it for now. Thank you so much for watching, and if you already haven't done it, please hit that subscribe button and leave a comment down below and tell me what you think about 3D printing terrain parts. I have a lot more videos coming up very soon, so thank you so much for being here, and I will see you soon.